All right, today we are digging into an ancient text that, speaks with a voice that feels incredibly modern. It's really a story about what happens when everything just completely falls apart. And maybe more importantly, how you can find hope in the absolute darkest of places. We're going to explore the message of Micah, chapter 7. It's a question that feels more relevant than ever, doesn't it? I mean, what really happens when the systems we all rely on just crumble, when trust completely dissolves, and it feels like there's just no goodness left anywhere? Well, the prophet Micah, he actually lived through this, and he documented all of it, starting with this really powerful, kind of haunting image of desolation. So the story kicks off with this really haunting image. The speaker says he feels like someone walking through a vineyard after the harvest is already over, just desperate to find anything to eat. But here's the thing. This isn't just an empty field. It has been picked so completely clean that there is absolutely nothing left. Not a single grape, not even one of those early figs he's craving. And that image, it brings us right to our first section, what it's like to live in a land without goodness. Because as you're about to see, this isn't really about fruit at all. This powerful metaphor, it's describing a society that has been totally stripped of its moral fabric. It's a land where goodness itself seems to have been harvested right into extinction. Now, to really wrap our heads around the depth of this despair, we gotta understand this concept of gleaning. See, in ancient Israel, the law literally required landowners to leave the edges of their fields for the poor to come and take. It was a built-in social safety net. But what Micah is saying here is that even the gleanings are gone. Think about that. It means there isn't a single righteous or pious person, a hasid as they were called, left to be found. The land is just utterly barren of goodness. So the big question is, how does a society even get to a point like this? Well, in our next section, we're going to explore the anatomy of this collapse. Because Micah doesn't just, complain about the problem. He gives us a very precise diagnosis of exactly how it all went wrong. And what we see is that the rot starts right at the very top. You've got the prince, the judge, the powerful elites. They're all in it together. The text actually says they work with both hands, meaning they are just enthusiastically weaving this giant net of corruption. The prince asks for bribes, the judge accepts them, and the great man just speaks his selfish desires and poof, it becomes policy. The whole system is basically designed to trap anyone who tries to be honest or who is poor. And this is the terrifying result. See, systemic corruption doesn't just stay in the halls of power. It trickles down and it poisons everything. It creates this ascending scale of distrust. First, you can't trust your neighbor. Then, you can't even have confidence in a close friend. It gets so bad you have to guard every word you say, even to your own spouse. And then, the final step, your own household, your family, becomes your enemy. Trust is just completely annihilated. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to imagine a darker, more hopeless situation, right? And yet, right here at absolute rock bottom, the entire narrative pivots. It just completely turns, all based on a single, powerful, conscious choice. So after detailing the absolute, total breakdown of his world, the speaker makes this solitary, almost defiant stand. He says, "But as for me," and listen, this is so much more than just a statement of faith. It's an act of incredible psychological resilience. This is the moment the speaker decides that his inner world will not be dictated by his outer circumstances. This verse right here, this is the hinge on which the entire story turns. And that one single act of defiant hope, well, it unleashes a complete transformation of reality. As we head into this next section, a great reversal begins, and pretty much everything that was true just moments ago is about to be turned completely on its head. The contrast here is just stark. I mean, every single element of despair from the first part of the chapter gets directly inverted. Where there was darkness, now the Lord is a light. Where there was falling, now there is rising. And those enemies who are mocking and gloating, yeah, they're about to face their own downfall. Okay, so when the text says the enemies will be covered in shame, it's really important we understand the cultural weight behind that phrase. For us, shame is an emotion, right? But in the ancient world, public disgrace wasn't just an embarrassment. It was basically a form of social death, a total loss of honor that many people considered a fate worse than actually dying. So this isn't a small thing. It signifies a complete and utterly humiliating defeat. And the imagery here, wow, it is visceral. The very same powers who are mocking the faithful, asking, "So, where is your God now?" They are the ones who will find themselves trampled underfoot just like mud in the street. It is a total, absolute, 180-degree reversal of fortunes. But here's the key. This reversal isn't just about payback. Not at all. It's about clearing the ground for something entirely new to be built. And that brings us to our final section, the promise of a new dawn, a really grand vision of complete and total restoration. And the promises being made here are just immense. This isn't just about barely surviving. It's about a massive renewal on a national scale. The city walls, they'll be rebuilt. The nation's boundaries, they're actually going to be extended. All the scattered exiles will come back home from every corner of the earth. And the land itself, this same land that was so desolate, it's going to become fruitful all over again. So what's the fuel for this incredible new beginning? It all comes down to an act of profound forgiveness, and it's described with one of the most powerful metaphors you'll ever hear. Sins aren't just, pardoned or overlooked. No, they are taken and literally cast into the depths of the sea. Gone. Forever. Never to be brought up again. You might be asking, so why? Why would God do this, especially after such a profound betrayal? Well, the text points us to this absolutely foundational concept, hesed. Now, this Hebrew word, it means so much more than just love or kindness. It's this loyal, faithful, unbreakable, covenant kind of love. It is the very character of God, and it is the ultimate reason that this kind of radical forgiveness and restoration is even possible. So this ancient chapter, it takes us on this incredible journey, all the way from a morally barren field to the very bottom of the sea. And what it suggests is that even in the middle of a total collapse, the hinge, the pivot point to a new dawn, is a single, solitary choice to look for hope. And so the question it leaves for us, for our own time, is a simple one. When everything seems lost, where will we choose to look?